The papers sat on the kitchen counter like it meant nothing. Daniel slid it across with one hand, barely looking up. Just your signature at the bottom. Routine stuff from the financial advisor. Patricia stood nearby, nodding the way she always did when she'd already decided something. I picked up the pen, and I signed it. What I didn't tell either of them, what I hadn't told a single person yet, was that 6 days earlier, I had been kneeling on the floor of an upstairs hallway, sorting through boxes from the attic, when I heard every word they said about me through the air vent. My grandmother Eleanor died 2 months before any of this happened. She was private, quietly stubborn, the kind of woman who never talked about money, because she believed talking about it made people lazy. I had no idea what she had accumulated over her lifetime until the estate attorney read the will aloud in a room full of people who suddenly went very still. The house, the land, investment accounts totaling just over $4 million, all of it mine. I remember Daniel squeezing my hand in that room and saying we would figure everything out together. I believed him. We had been married for 10 years. He was calm, measured, reliable in the way that made you stop checking behind you. Patricia could be difficult, most mothers-in-law are, but nothing about either of them had ever suggested something like this was possible. I filed the inheritance away in my mind as something I would deal with slowly. There was no rush. The estate attorney had everything organized. I just needed time to grieve and think. That's what I told myself while I carried boxes down from the attic that afternoon. The vent near the upstairs hallway is something I had forgotten about entirely. Old houses move sound in strange ways. You learn their quirks after years of living in them, and then you stop noticing. I was on my knees pulling open a dusty cardboard box when Patricia's voice came through clearly from the kitchen below. Once she signs this, the money's ours. I stopped moving. Daniel answered without a pause, without hesitation, without any of the weight that sentence deserved. She trusts me too much. I don't know how long I stayed completely still. A few seconds, maybe longer. I kept waiting for laughter, a punchline, some signal that I had pulled 2 fragments of a larger, innocent conversation out of context. It never came. Patricia said the lawyer had confirmed it would work, that once the transfer went through, it couldn't be undone. Then Danielle said something that I haven't been able to forget since. Good, she never reads legal documents anyway. I came downstairs before they could say anything else. They stopped talking the moment they heard my footsteps. When I walked into the kitchen, Patricia was standing at the counter with a folder in front of her. Daniel picked it up quickly, a little too quickly, and smiled. Perfect timing, he said. The document looked exactly like every other contract I'd ever been handed. Dense paragraphs, legal language, a blank signature line at the bottom with a small arrow sticker pointing to it. Just sign here. It lets me manage the investments, so you don't have to deal with the details. Patricia nodded along. You've never liked dealing with financial people. She wasn't wrong. That was the part that made it so precise. They had built the lie out of something true. If I had come downstairs 5 minutes earlier, if I had never gone upstairs at all, I would have signed it immediately and thought nothing of it. Instead, I looked at Daniel for a long moment. Then I picked up the pen and signed my name. 6 days passed. The evenings felt strangely ordinary. Patricia made dinner. Daniel talked about work. The document was never mentioned again. I didn't bring it up, and neither did they. The house felt like a stage set, everything positioned correctly, everyone performing their lines. I was sitting at my desk at work when my phone rang. The number belonged to the estate attorney who had handled my grandmother's will, a man named Michael Reeves. His voice was careful, professional. The kind of tone that tells you immediately something is wrong before the actual words arrive. "Mrs. Carter, I need to ask you about a document you signed last week." My stomach dropped before I could answer. He told me the document was a full asset transfer agreement that, according to its language, I had voluntarily handed control of the estate, the house, the land, every investment account to my husband. The stated reason was that I lacked financial experience and had requested him to manage everything on my behalf. I had signed my grandmother's entire legacy over to Daniel without knowing what I was signing. But Reeves wasn't calling just to tell me that. "The document you signed looks official," he said. "The formatting is close to ours, the language is similar, your signature is real. But the document itself did not come from this office." I leaned back in my chair. "You're saying it's fake?" Yes, there was more. Someone had attempted to file the document with the county the previous day. A clerk had flagged it because several of the reference numbers embedded in the legal language belonged to completely different estate cases. The clerk contacted Reeves. Reeves contacted me. For now, nothing had transferred, but someone had clearly intended it to. He asked me one question before ending the call: whether I had fully understood the document when I signed it. I told him the truth. I said no. He told me to come to his office the following morning, to bring any copies I had, and to sign nothing else for anyone. I left work early. When I got home, Daniel was in the living room with his laptop. He looked up when I walked in, and I told him it had been a slow day. I went into the kitchen. He followed a moment later. "By the way," he said, "the paperwork you signed is almost processed. Once it's finalized, I'll start reorganizing the investment accounts." I nodded. "Sounds good." He seemed satisfied with that and went back to the living room. That night, I didn't sleep. Michael Reeves placed the document on the desk between us the next morning. My signature was right there at the bottom. I recognized it immediately. The title at the top of the page made everything real in a way the phone call hadn't quite managed. Full asset transfer agreement. Reeves walked me through it carefully. $4 million in assets. My home, my grandmother's accounts. All of it reassigned to Daniel based on my supposed request. Then he said something unexpected. Whoever wrote this made a very unusual mistake. I looked up. What kind of mistake? He tapped the middle of the page. A paragraph buried deep inside the document, surrounded by dense language designed to make your eyes slide right past it, contained a clause that almost certainly wasn't intentional. He read it slowly. "In the event of any dispute regarding the administration or ownership of the transferred assets, the original estate beneficiary retains unilateral authority to initiate an immediate financial audit and asset freeze without notice." I stared at him. He explained it plainly. If I suspected fraud or misuse at any point for any reason, I could legally freeze every single account connected to the estate, instantly, without warning, without needing a court order first. That includes accounts your husband controls. Yes, the person who wrote that document had accidentally given me a weapon. Reeves had one more piece of information. The document hadn't been drafted by an amateur. The legal structure, the formatting, the language, it was professional work. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing had built this. He opened a folder and turned one page toward me. At the bottom was a printed name. I recognized it immediately. I had met him twice at family dinners. His name was Richard Halpen, Patricia's personal attorney, the man who had handled her real estate dealings, her taxes, her small business paperwork for years. His credentials had been used to prepare the forged transfer agreement. Reeves was careful about his wording. He said it strongly suggested Patricia was involved. But I already knew. The voice through the vent had told me everything I needed. Patricia had arranged it, Daniel had delivered it, and a lawyer they both trusted had built the mechanism. My phone buzzed on Reeves's desk during our meeting. It was a message from Daniel. Good news. I'm meeting with the bank this afternoon about the estate accounts. I showed it to Reeves. He read it once and gave a small nod. Well, he said, that answers whether they're planning to move the money. He slid a card across the desk, the direct line for the bank's legal department. If Daniel attempted any transfers that afternoon, I was to call immediately and invoke the audit clause. I picked up the card and went home. Daniel left for the bank, looking completely relaxed. He adjusted his watch near the front door, told me it was routine, that once everything was organized, I wouldn't have to deal with any of it. He smiled when he said that. I watched his car disappear down the street. Then I sat at the kitchen table with the card in front of me and waited. 23 minutes later, my phone rang. The woman on the line identified herself as Linda Torres from the bank's legal compliance office. Daniel was currently there, she said. He was attempting to initiate several large transfers from accounts connected to the Eleanor Whitmore estate. 3 investment accounts, the primary holding account. Total amount, approximately $3.8 million. He wasn't managing assets, he was emptying them. Torres explained that before processing anything, they were required to verify with the original beneficiary. She asked if I wanted to challenge it. I thought about Daniel sitting inside that bank, confident, certain, probably already planning what came next. I took a breath. I'd like to invoke the audit clause in the transfer agreement. A short pause. Typing. Understood, Mrs. Carter. All accounts connected to the estate will be frozen instantly. Then, in the background, I heard Daniel's voice. What do you mean? Frozen. Torres kept the line open. She told me quietly that Daniel was asking questions, that he was showing the transfer document again, that he looked very confident, present tense, she said, because that was about to change. Then she told me something else. When the freeze activated, the system had flagged several transactions Daniel had attempted to schedule the previous day, transfers to 2 private accounts, one belonging to Daniel, the other belonging to Patricia. They had planned to split it. Torres lowered her voice slightly and told me Daniel had just realized the accounts were frozen. I heard him in the background. This must be a mistake. And then, louder, what do you mean my wife froze the accounts? I told Torres she could tell him the truth. She did. I drove to the bank 20 minutes later. Daniel was still in the conference room when I walked in. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. You froze the accounts? Yes. The bank's fraud officer placed the document on the table between us. Daniel confirmed I had signed it. The officer turned to me and asked if I had understood what I was signing. I said no. Daniel's expression shifted. What are you talking about? The officer slid another paper across. The document had never been issued by the estate attorney. It contained multiple fraudulent reference numbers. It had been filed with the county using credentials that hadn't been authorized. Daniel said that was impossible. That's when Michael Reeves walked in. He placed a folder on the table. Inside were documents filed that morning with the County Fraud Division. He explained that the transfer agreement had been prepared using the credentials of attorney Richard Halpern, and that Halpern denied authorizing it. The room was quiet for a moment. Then the door opened again. 2 detectives stepped inside. Daniel Carter. He looked at me one last time. You set me up. I shook my head. No, you and your mother did that yourselves. Patricia was arrested later that afternoon. The forged document, the scheduled transfers, the bank records, all of it together was enough. In less than 48 hours, everything they had built collapsed completely. The estate remained untouched. $4 million, still legally mine, exactly as my grandmother had intended. But standing in that conference room, watching detectives lead my husband out in handcuffs, I realized something I hadn't fully prepared for. The money had never been the thing I was afraid of losing. 10 years of marriage ended that afternoon inside a bank. Not loudly, not with an argument or a revelation, or any of the dramatic moments you imagine when you think about a marriage falling apart. Just a room full of lawyers and detectives and a document with my signature at the bottom. The strangest part, the part I still think about, is that they almost succeeded because they knew me. They knew I didn't like financial paperwork. They knew I trusted Daniel completely. They built the entire plan around the person they believed I was. What they miscalculated was the air vent and the fact that sometimes the people who believe they know you best are the ones who understand you least.